even as we are growing fast.
In the last few minutes of this conversation, I want to turn towards the end of your book, which has a very interesting sort of narrative device where you anticipate some of the questions that people like myself, but also the general reader, would put to both of you. And you take on the question of the place of religion in our democracy. And you talk about Hinduism, and you talk about how the very sort of essence of Hinduism is to be, I think the phrase you use is open and diffused, and you give it an economic nomenclature. You take a word from economics. I'm going to let you tell the audience what that is and then explain it. So, Dr. Rajan, when you had to grapple with that question, why was that question important in a book on reimagining India's economic future? How is it linked? And B, how do you see this debate around, are we a Hindu nation? What is the place of Hinduism? 80% of India is Hindu. You've anticipated these questions from your readers, so go ahead.
So, look, I think we were born as a democracy which wasn't identified with a religion. Yes, we are 80% Hindu. Both Rohit and I are Hindus. But that doesn't, in a sense, as a country, we are a secular democracy. And I think that means we treat all religions equally. You are free to practice your religion. Pakistan chose a different route. It became a Muslim country. And we deliberately didn't do that because of the wisdom of our founding fathers. We keep saying in the book that this kind of stance is really important going forward, because we want to be an attractive country. We want to do business with the rest of the world. We want them to see us as a hospitable, welcoming country. That is important. But even within our country, if we want to make the best use of our human resources, the way to do that is to treat everyone equally. No appeasement, but no discrimination either. Equal treatment is what we want. And what we see again and again in the book is, how do we create that equal treatment? It means focusing on making government work for everyone. And what that requires, very importantly, is a strong democracy, a place where even the poorest person can stand up and say, I need my government service. Why is it not being provided? Without a fear of being put in jail for violating some act or the other. We also need, in many ways, government to learn. We need data to be collected. Here is where you did wrong. Here is where things are going off track. Here's what you need to fix again. And so that requires, again, because we're talking about a new path for government, it requires course correction repeatedly, which is why you have to know where you're going wrong. And where you're going to go, knowing that means you should be open to criticism. You cannot shut down critics and say, I don't want that fellow appearing on TV because he's always protesting about this or that. That's the kind of country we need. We have the possibilities.
If I could just get Rohit to come in on that also, you do tackle this very politically loaded phrase, appeasement. And I think the way you address it is by saying that, yes, political parties have been guilty sometimes of backing radical politics, but there is no policy, there is no government policy that has led to Muslims being economically better off than the others. So if you just want to weigh in on that, right?
See, Barkha, when I was growing up, my nana used to use this term, which has always stuck with me, called santulan. And I think this is super important in terms of the discourse on the political economy and how politics interacts with economics. And we really try to, carefully try to build this argument in the third part of the book, as you're pointing out. And I think we're very straightforward. We're very open, at least, in our opinion, about saying, yes, there was a left-wing tinge to how history was written in India. Arguably there has been some kind of appeasement with radicals across religions in India. And this is a problem. It's independent of political parties. It's independent of, we as a society and as a civil society and as citizens must acknowledge this. Having said that, how do we look at ourselves going ahead in the future? And we say that for the economic model that we have in mind, creativity and ability to criticize and build arguments is very important. And we cannot, this cannot be emphasized enough. There's plenty of historical evidence to suggest that, societies which are tolerant, which allow dissent, are the ones that end up being most creative. and we want India
Yeah.
to be a creative economy. In terms of um, you know the narrative around appeasement, we should, as Raghu was saying, we should always try to go back to the data and try to critically evaluate ourselves. Has there been appeasement in some way? Who's benefiting from which policies? And I think we should try to critically analyze what kind of good, so the example we give is about the policemen in Uttar Pradesh, and a very small fraction of them are Muslims. So in comparison to the fraction of their population in the state. So we must critically evaluate all these things through data and inform the public about where policy is going right and where policy is going wrong.
And there's some very interesting data in the book. I'll leave it for readers to read it on polygamy. You pick up one of the most politicized conversations, and I urge people to read the book and read for yourself.